Well, hello and welcome to this brand new episode of Livefist Talks. We're joined by Ankur Kanaglekar. He's the head of India fighter sales at Boeing Defense. Very interesting time for fighter sales in the country. There's a lot happening in the country security-wise, and there's heightened interest in modernization as well. Ankur, welcome. Really good to see you. How are you doing? And tell us about what's been going on. Very interesting time for the fighter market at this time, especially here in India.
Absolutely, Shiv. And before I start, let me say that it's pleasure to be here with you virtually. I know we have met before face to face, but as they say, this is the new normal. We have to get used to it. But I really appreciate the opportunity for me to come here and talk about our India Fighters campaign with the main focus on our F-18 Indian Navy offer. But you're absolutely right. I think a lot is going on, and I hope I can provide some good insights in terms of how we see our offer helping Indian Navy in the current environment. Okay, so let's see. So since Shiv, we were talking about the whole virtual introduction, and what occurred to me, just not many weeks back, we were sort of working on this Block 3, which is the latest variant of Super Hornet, and proposing the features to Indian Navy, writing these in our pitches and things like that. And just few weeks back, the Block 3 aircraft has its first test flight, right? So it is something to say or to write about in a paper, but to actually see that come in real life, it's something very exciting. Now, obviously, we could not be there for the test flight. We had to sort of experience that joy virtually. But it's pretty exciting milestone in the life cycle of Super Hornet, right? Which, as you know, Shiv, we are not completely alien to this. It's a most advanced multi-role frontline US Navy fighter, and the Block 3 is the latest variant of that. In 2019, US Navy ordered about 78 of those, which are going to be delivered until 2024. The first two jets were delivered for further testing to the US Navy, and hopefully they will get rigorously tested out there. So the interesting part really, Shiv, is the tremendous amount of investment that has gone into Block 3 from US Navy as from the international customer. It has really made the already more advanced aircraft more lethal, and Indian Navy would get advantage by sort of incorporating these technologies for the investment that has already been made.
It's taken a lot of pain and money to get to the Rafale. Why should the Indian Air Force or the Indian Navy look at a different fighter?
Okay, so let me start with the Air Force, because that's where your initial question was directed at. So all I can say, Shiv, right now is we have applied for the license to market F15EX. And we are just waiting for the requirements to come from Indian Air Force. It is sort of premature to comment on that until we know the exact requirements. Because as you know, as you very rightly said, a lot of years have passed, the technology has improved, the geopolitics has changed. So I would rather wait to see the requirement before commenting on what is our sort of the plan for the Air Force side, right? But on the Navy side, what I would like to say is Air Force and Navy have a very two distinct requirements. It's a different world altogether when you're talking about the naval aviation, a 200 meters runway versus 9,000 meter plus, right? So from that standpoint, I think we feel that Super Hornet provides more for less. The capabilities that we have infused are unrivaled. And more importantly, it is the other benefits that Indian Navy will get through the collaboration, through the growth potential, with the fact that tremendous amount of scale of this aircraft exists out there. They will not get that anywhere else, right? And obviously, we wait for the requirements to come in. As you know, we have responded to 57 aircraft RFI. Several dialogues and interactions are happening with Indian Navy, and all I can say is we are fully committed to ensure that it will meet and exceeds Navy's expectation with the requirements come out.
Your partner HAL, I'm sure you've seen that on Livefist, where HAL's chief has been quite candid as far as the Indian Air Force's campaign is concerned for 114 fighters. I mean, there's nothing secretive about it. This is a view that's been held by everyone. You've said it now as well. We need to wait for those specifications to actually be articulated by the Air Force before Boeing can decide which aircraft best fits that program.
Yeah.
But he said something very important, which actually reflects many things that sort of give people a deja vu about the MMRCA. And we all know what happened with the MMRCA. He says it's going to be extremely difficult for the Indian Air Force to draft requirements that cover fighters as disparate as the F-15 and the Su-35 at one end, and much smaller single-engine fighters at the other, the Super Hornets and the others somewhere in the middle. Would you share that assessment that it is going to be difficult, and that when the requirements, and I'm not asking you to comment on the requirements, but when the requirements finally come, they will have to necessarily be more focused, or else run the risk of going down the MMRCA path?
Well, I mean, I would not hypothesize about the requirements and the impact, but all I can say, Shiv, is the reason we have applied for a license so that we can bring the entire spectrum of the capabilities to the plane, right? And depending on how the requirements get panned out, I think we are comfortable, very confident that we will have a solution, the right solution that will meet the requirements over there. But it is too early to say whether it will favor single engine or twin engine, or whether it is easy or difficult. We would rather wait and then take a call on that.
Because when we reported about the F-15, Boeing looking for a license to pitch the F-15 as well, could you tell us a little bit about where things are at as far as that is concerned, and also some of the rationale behind that? Because I've been covering the MMRCA contest from the start. In fact, I was one of the first journalists who reported on the Super Hornet being part of the competition. If I remember correctly, it was sometime in 2006, 2007 when that happened, 14 years ago. Incredible. And now we're talking about the F-15 and the F-18. Could you just give us a sense of the rationale? Because that must have been a pretty important decision.
Yeah, Shiv. All we can say right now is we have applied for a license. All I can say is you will get more opportunities very soon to hear about F-15EX and about our Air Force campaign. But right now, unfortunately, because of the process, of the stage of the process that we are in, I won't be able to share much about the Air Force campaign over there. But I can guarantee that very soon you will get that opportunity to hear more about that. And kind of reiterating the fact about the rationale out there, I would take a step backwards and say that, look, Boeing as a company has multiple products out there. And while the requirements get finalized on that entire spectrum, we want to bring our full capability to ensure that we provide value to the customer over there, right? And as the requirement gets finalized, we'll get probably more clarity, and we can probably share more about that with you at that stage.
What kind of response have you gotten as far as the idea of the F-15 is concerned? Not about the campaign itself, but the idea that you've got this legendary fighter. The F-15 is also very well regarded, but the F-15 has had this sort of huge resurrection in the United States. It's being purchased as well by the US military. What kind of response are you sensing from your potential customer on the F-15 also being added to the mix?
Yeah, so right now, I think, as I said, we have applied for a license. US Air Force is interfacing with the Indian Air Force on that aspect. You're absolutely right. The platform has had a resurrection, the 144, which are in the president's budget, and the aircraft. In fact, we recently had a flight test of that. So we are quite excited about the capability of these aircraft and what it can do to the Indian Air Force. But as I said, this is just at a platform level. In terms of how it actually impacts the campaign, what kind of feedback we get, we'll probably have to wait until certain things get finalized. Okay, now let me actually switching to answer your question on the F-18 side, because that's an interesting one where several dialogues we have had with Indian Navy this year and last year about this particular campaign. Because once we responded to the RFI, there were a lot more questions, there were a lot more answers, close partnership with US Navy on all those aspects. And happy to say that as the requirement gets finalized, it will be the most complete and compelling solution for the Indian Navy. Also, what we, since you asked the question about the feedback, I think, Shiv, the subject matter expertise that resides in Boeing with respect to the naval aviation, and also within the US Navy because of the pedigree of Super Hornet, is unrivaled. And I think that comes out very clearly when we have these conversations. And let's face it, it is something unique to put these aircrafts on the Indian Navy carriers out there. We are confident that with the knowledge base that we have, we'll be able to provide value and meet those requirements.
Ankur, as you no doubt know that there's a new program within the Indian system to build a twin-engine deck-based fighter, a sort of super Tejas of sorts, with an aim to actually see it enter flight test within this decade, because the LCA Navy was found to be not optimal enough for carrier deck operations. Where does an aircraft or a requirement like the Super Hornet within the 57 deck-based fighters requirement of the Indian Navy fit in with such an indigenous development program? Would Boeing be looking at any kind of opportunities there? Can both things actually coexist? Will this new development in any way sort of derail the requirement for these new fighters for the Indian Navy? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so all I can say, Shiv, is how the indigenous program impact the acquisition. It's probably a relevant question for the Indian Navy. We don't have any comment on that. All we can say that we fully support and have been supporting the indigenous capabilities developments in India with respect to many other things that are happening over here. We continue to have dialogue with Indian Navy on the 57 aircraft. I could also say that because of the tremendous breadth of scale that we have in India, in terms of number of people, our research and technology arm, the investment that we are making as we speak on innovation, skilling, and other aspects of this, these are the building blocks towards indigenization, right? So even though we may or may not be involved, and it's too early to say because obviously we are focused on the campaign, the growth that we are seeing in the aerospace sector and the investment that we are making from the Make in India perspective, but more because we see the tremendous value in India. These are the building blocks that will ultimately help the indigenous programs, right? Just like on the automotive sector, you saw the capabilities being developed, and then basically it created a base for indigenous development. So we fully supportive of that through our own ways of growing our capabilities in it.
We recently, revealed on Livefist that one of India's most critical future fighter programs, the AMCA, the fifth generation project, is going to be a public-private partnership, between the Aeronautical Development Agency (HAL) and a private partner who is yet to be chosen. There are some front runners, but it's yet to be chosen. I know that the AMCA has been on Boeing's radar in the past as far as the F-18 campaign is concerned, and how it can actually plug into that program in terms of technologies. Within these new developments around the AMCA, are there any opportunities that Boeing is looking at?
Yeah, so I would like to answer that in two ways, Shiv. The first one is you made an interesting comment about the synergies, right? I think it's important that we look at these indigenous programs not only through the lens of a company A partnering with company B. It needs to be looked at in the way of what is happening around in the ecosystem and where are the synergies, right? So I'll give you an example. The F-18 flies on the G414 engine, right? And the same family of engine is there going to be on the indigenous Tejas aircraft, right? So if Navy goes for F-18 aircraft, the fact that with the 57, with the additional LCS coming in, there is an opportunity, again, subject to government approval and discussion with the tier one partners to sort of localize and to think about where it could benefit, right? So that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is when we are talking about AMCA, going back to my earlier answer, we are talking about where can we put the capabilities and the investment that we are putting in India today. How does it help the ecosystem, right? And that effort is continuous effort. It has not stopped. So irrespective of whether it's an indigenous naval fighter or the Air Force fighter, the investment that we're putting in India is going to help those. And we are very happy about it because ultimately in the aerospace industry, you partner, you compete, but that's how the industry grows with the common knowledge and that's exactly what we want to sort of see in India.
Speaking about your partnerships with Indian companies, just circling back to your partnership with HAL that you'd announced, some months ago, which was basically structured around the F-18. That's basically Boeing, Mahindra, and HAL. Ankur, would that also cover the F-15 if and when a decision is taken, or it's restricted to the F-18?
Well, it's too early to say, Shiv, because again, it depends on requirements, right? The scope, requirements that drive the business case, that drive the other discussions. So it's too early to say whether it will, but all I can say is we are fully committed with Mahindra and HAL for the F-18. That partnership exists. Obviously, we wait for the requirements to see how it will pan out.
Boeing confident that the 114 fighter, the Made in India fighter deal will go through? There have been apprehensions that it's complicated, it's ambitious, it's the strategic partnership policy, and that's a whole new subject, the strategic partnership policy, which we'll keep for a separate day and sort of dissect it. But HAL is confident. They say that the Chief of Air Staff has said that there's no way around it. We need these fighters. So is that what Boeing is going with as well, that this is going to happen? Because there has been buzz that there could be some, it might be deprioritized right now because you've got the LCA coming in, production rates might actually be ramped up, etc., etc.
Yeah, so, this is again a question I would defer to the Indian Air Force, Shiv. It's their requirement in terms of how they want to prioritize the thing. All we can see is we have a full spectrum of solution that will meet whenever they are ready to talk about when they finalize the requirements, right? Clearly, I think we see that there is a need. We also see that this could be a jumping stone for AMCA and otherwise. And I think we wait to hear back from Indian Air Force before we could, say whether it is going to happen or not.
On the F-18, once again, Ankur, as far as testing compatibility is concerned, like you said, the ski jump test and other things, are those exercises to prove the aircraft compatible with India's current and next aircraft carriers? Are those complete, or is it still happening?
Well, it's an ongoing dialogue, right? And as you could imagine, Shiv, it's a very complex engineering problem to solve. It is not something that there is a question and a answer. It's a continuous dialogue that goes on. We have had several of those dialogues, right? And as we have mentioned to you earlier, we have run several simulation and studies. And our ski jump is just a validation of that, right? So I don't think there is an end date to say that it's done. I think it will go on. But based on what we have done so far, based on the information that is available, we are very confident that it will meet the requirements.
What's the next step as far as Make in India is concerned? Because I know that that's quite separate from the concrete opportunities you have, because this is something that Boeing has always wanted to do. Parts of the Chinook are made in India, fuselages of the Apaches are made here, the gun bay doors of the F-18s. Give us a preview of what the next step in your Make in India plan looks like. What else are you hoping to do here in India?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think before I go into the details, Shiv, I think Make in India is not only a slogan for us. We started doing that way before it was termed, that particular term came out. And we are doing it because we see win-win. We see an opportunity to bring the best of Boeing to India and best of India to Boeing through our investments in India. We have more than 160 suppliers. Our sourcing from India is going to top $1 billion. But it doesn't end there. We are investing in skilling. We are investing in innovation. We are investing in our technology footprint, which is going to be one of the largest outside of the United States. And we are doing this not because we want to, obviously it helps for the campaigns and standpoint, but it really gives a win-win to all the stakeholders involved, right? What I would say that in terms of your question, I think with the campaigns going on, you also need to think about sustain in India along with make in India. And the reason why that is important, because 80% of the value of your platform throughout the life cycle is going to be on the sustainment, right? Our plan, what we call as the Buy India for India sustainment, which builds on our successful sustainment program that are currently going on with Indian Air Force and Indian Navy customer. Tremendous knowledge base. We have put some investment in people and infrastructure, and we want to build on that and provide something in partnership with Indian Navy, US Navy, and India-based and US-based suppliers to really ensure that the aircraft have higher availability with Indian Navy, but more importantly, subject to government approval, it allows us to create certain capabilities to sustain the aircraft in India, right? Because that's where in the long run, you really can develop a lot of value for the Indian Navy customer over there. So when you asked about Make in India, I would think about that in a more broader context over there in terms of sustainment as well.
Ankur, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for giving us your time and speaking to us here on Livefist. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Shiv. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And, again, thank you for providing the opportunity to come here. And we hope to in touch with you. I'm sure this is an exciting campaign. More things are going to happen. But let's keep in touch. And thanks again for having me.